what attracted you to the financial planning profession, and who are you most excited to serve as a financial advisor, financial planner?
So what attracted me to the financial planning profession? It's a long story. I'll keep it as short as I possibly can. But I think it really came down to people. I had a long, winding journey to get to my first RIA that I worked at. And I had a background, as Cody and I talk about often, in music, but also a degree in psychology. And my first job in psychology, I was drawn to it because I was interested in people. And I got placed in a place that was really tough to navigate for a 20-something. Issues that were bigger than I was capable of comfortably dealing with, and I was taking things home, and I decided to leave the profession. So years later, when I learned that there's a way to help people in two areas that were of great interest to me, that of personal finance and also just people, I kind of fell in love with the profession. And from there, all of the steps kind of started to fall into place. One of my first decisions was to take the CFP exam. So, and I tell everyone that I work with in class that I took it in 2018, I passed, and I loved it so much that I've continued to do it ever since.
You're like, I just want to keep going through test questions. Like
I just love it.
Got addicted to it. That's fantastic. So Adam's not just passionate about being a financial planner, but serving the future of the profession. And it's exciting to see people in all different areas, like whether aspiring, not yet in the profession, all the way to 40 plus years in the profession, just passionate, not just about doing their work, but about sharing and being generous to the future generations of financial planners. I want to introduce our three recent exam takers. I'm sure sometimes it's even hard to remember. I mean, it's been a few months, but I'm sure you blocked it out pretty quick after you took it, maybe. But so Damien, Dan, and Jackie are on the call here. And I'd love for each of you to answer that, that introductory question briefly. So I'll start with you, Damien. Thanks for being on the call today. What attracted you to the financial planning profession, and who are you most excited to serve as a financial advisor, financial planner?
So I guess I've always had a penchant for financial planning. I have no formal experience before the CFP program, but I always loved kind of doing my budget, my family's budget, managing my own investments, prepping for retirement. I love shopping for home and auto insurance. I'm doing that right now. I even like doing taxes. So, I'm a career changer, like you mentioned. And prior to doing the CFP, I was in the call center world. So I was in account management and project management for 25 years, but I knew I didn't want to do that forever. So kind of at the beginning of COVID, I started thinking about, what I wanted to do. And that's where kind of financial planning came in. And that's how I wanted to kind of spend the third act of my working year. So I did talk to some financial planners just to kind of see what they do, and all of that kind of appealed to me. So I decided on the CFP, kind of over just doing like investment stuff and getting a Series 65 or a 63. It was more holistic. It covered, kind of all aspects of financial planning. So I did the education, did the review, took the test in November, and now I'm kind of ending my sabbatical, I guess, and looking to get back into the workforce. Since I have no kind of formal experience, I know I'll kind of be starting as like an associate financial planner or maybe a client services or even a paraplanner. So I don't know yet, who my ideal client will be. So I'm just looking to kind of get in there and keep learning.
That's a perfect example of, you don't have to have everything like figured out. It's a lean startup. Whether you're an employer as a financial planner, you're always iterating and finding new ways to figure out who you're going to serve, how you're going to serve them, and ultimately, right, how you're going to make a living doing that. So next, I'd love to hear from Dan. I know you reached out to me before even as you started this journey, so I'm excited to have you on the call.
Cody and I both had blogs back. I don't know if it was like 2018 or 19, maybe. I think it might be when we first connected, but yeah, I remember Cody was wanting to change careers. And so to see Cody from going career changer CFP program to all of this is pretty amazing. So I definitely feel like a slacker, but working backward, I just got registered on last Thursday and launched. So I did that, took the Series 65 last October, took the CFP last July. And then in September of 2021, I was in the Army as an active duty Army officer, where I served as a physical therapist. And so I had, a couple years before that, I just kind of had a couple moments where I was really into personal finance, investing. I love all that same stuff. I'm sure that's a common denominator among us all. But I just had a few different experiences where it really just made me question, like, I loved what I was doing, and my mission in the military as a PT was to serve those who serve us. And so I feel like I kind of, as my identity shifted away from maybe Army officer and physical therapist, I just started thinking about how I could serve other people. And so then again, kind of a handful of events that just kind of really pushed me toward that. And so I think it was around February of 2019 is when I was like, I am done. I'm definitely going to make a pivot here. And so, yeah, that kind of set in motion getting out of the military in 2021. And then I began the CFP program immediately in November. And I went through the American College and knocked out each class in a month, and then took it in July. And I honestly like that approach.
Absolutely. It's nice to know there are other, like, kind of drinking out of the fire hose binge CFPers. I'm really excited. They're going to continue to be able to serve people now in this new profession that's so different, but yet you're going to have some similar experiences serving people who really need your help. I appreciate you being here. Jackie, I always mention you're my favorite person. I probably just annoy you with this, but I'd love to hear more about who and how you serve. And why did you want to join this this growing profession?
Dan, also thank you for your service. I have a lot of military people in my family. So for me, so I the way I met you, Cody, is through the fire community. It was, I guess, when you were still a musician, and to see you kind of take the CFP and pass it and start your own firm and do cool things like this and measure trice planners, it's like, I'm a huge fan. But for me, I guess I would be in the career changer bucket, but technically I retired from my corporate job in 2019. And I wanted to go back and get my master's. So I went to Kansas State, and I was really going for that wonderful financial therapy master's. But there's those 6 financial planning classes. And that was not my goal at all. And then after a few classes, somehow I drank the Kool-Aid. All of my classmates were going for that. So I thought about it. And I think one of the deciding factors for me was when the CFP board published those demographics about who is CFPs. If you look at this call, I'm the only woman, I'm the only person of color or Black person. So that started me to think. And I'm like, even though I might not want to do financial planning in the traditional sense, the education part, I come by way of financial literacy, financial education. I'm like, why wouldn't I want all those skills and all that knowledge that I would get, via the CFP? I think what helped me see that I didn't have to go down that traditional path was you were doing cool things. I participated in the externship a couple of times. So many people were doing cool things that really helped to change my mind that, hey, I can do some cool things too. So that's kind of what brought me there. As far as like who I get most excited about serving, I do like working with the fire people because I retired early myself. And so I had to, I guess, learn some of those, how do you get the money out of your retirement accounts early, and health insurance, all those things I'm very, very familiar with, which helped me with the exam as well. But also, I just want to sort of serve those people that are at either the beginning of their wealth building life or restarting their wealth building. Because for me, I started kind of modestly. I was basically in poverty. And once I learned the financial stuff, like that started opening all these doors. Like it was the key for me. So I'm like, how many other people are like me, where if they just had exposure and a little bit of education, that they would be off to the races like I was. So that's kind of what, who I'd love to serve. And that's what kind of gets me excited.
In your final week leading up to the exam, I know it's hard to think about necessarily, but what was your quote unquote strategy? How did it work well or not? I mean, I know you passed, but were there some things that you would advise future test takers to spend their time on with just 1 week remaining?
It did help to go to the location. I didn't take like the formal test drive, but I drove there around the time that I knew I'd be driving to the location on the day of my exam. In my mind, anything I could alleviate and not have to think about that day the better. So I didn't want to have to think about traffic. I didn't want to have to think about which part of the building I go to and stuff like that. Another thing that was really helpful was Prometric. I think it's on the CFP board website, but they have like a online demo. And that helped because I was able to read the instructions and be very familiar with them. So I didn't have to waste the time while I was in the exam. It gave me, I guess, a more comfort level with using some of the features like highlighting and strikeout and things like that. And then I was doing a lot of questions. And I think about 10 days before I did my second practice exam. And I was just trying to focus on, okay, what is still my weakness? And it better not be these 3 or 4 really highly weighted areas. And one of them it was investing. And so I put my butt in gear and I'm like, there's no way I can pass the exam if I don't get investments. You know, if I don't, I was thinking on the practice exam, minimum, I need to be 70-ish plus. So those are kind of the things that were going through my head a week before.
One thing I want to mention here about investments, by the way, is I printed out, thing is you don't need to memorize all the formulas they're given to you. I'm pretty sure they're still given to you on the exam. But one thing that I did though, is I printed out what they were going to give me. And I just like, I did a little dash next to each variable to say what it was. Like this squiggly thing means standard deviation. And what I did is I printed out just blank ones. And each day I would just go through the blank sheet and like write my variables. So the thing is that way, when I had a question about investments, I immediately, okay, they show me standard deviation. Most likely it's going to be one of these with the squiggly, right? So if you want to practice investments on your last week, maybe just print out like the blank sheet and just say, do I remember which formulas, not necessarily for what, but like even just knowing which variable is included in that formula was helpful to me.
So one mistake I made was I was actually in the process of closing on my first real estate investment property. And when we started looking at it, I threw out a closing date and I didn't realize that it was, I think, the day before I took the CFP exam. And so the weeks leading up to it, I was kind of preoccupied. I would say the good of that was that I was way less stressed about the exam. The bad was that I was not studying for it like I should have been. Kind of like Jackie was saying, really prepping yourself for that day mentally, I think, is really key. So even though I didn't have the best last 2 weeks, I think just kind of getting prepped for it. But then that day, I think it was the night before the exam, actually, that was when I found out that you found out if you passed right after the exam. And so that created an extreme amount of test anxiety for me. And I've never had that before on any of the other big tests I've taken like this. And so, I don't know, just, I like to be prepared, but also be prepared for what's unexpected, I would say, and just be ready to take the exam no matter what.
The mental preparation of framing is going to be much more important than like that one topic that you can't quite get right. Damon, go ahead with your week leading up to the exam. What did you try? Did it work? What would you recommend?
Yeah, so like Jackie, I did a drive-by to Prometric. I had never taken a proctored test before. I didn't know where Prometric was, and I wanted to make sure I was comfortable with everything. So about a week before I drove by, I found it. It's buried in a strip mall, but the parking lot was empty. This was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Parking lot was empty. Place was dark, locked up. So I wasn't expecting that. But I tried to call. They didn't have a local number, so I had to call the kind of national office, and eventually found out they're only open on test days and not open every day of the week. So that was crisis averted for me for that, and that made me feel a lot better. But the week up to it, I did Q banks. I had already taken the practice tests also. Again, like Jackie, I used it for try to find weak areas, but also be familiar with how to highlight and strike through and mark questions to go back to, strike out answers I didn't want to use. So I was really comfortable with how to take the test. I reviewed on my flashcards. I use Brainscape for flashcards. I prefer kind of online flashcards for scoring and organization. I know a lot of people like handwritten, but and then day of the test, I was prepared with my checklist of items, your government ID, your confirmation of the test, your calculator, a couple extra batteries, you just never know. And the check-in was quick. I arrived there like 45 minutes early. The check-in was pretty quick. So I actually started the test probably 30 minutes earlier. It's supposed to be 8 a.m. I started like 7:30. But one of the things I didn't fully know was that other people were going to be coming in, to the room while I was taking the test. So there were people walking by me, people getting set up on their station. So just be aware that that could happen. And a lot of places give you the headphones to kind of block out sound. But if you do get there early, just prepared to, kind of sit down and focus and get started.
Adam, so what are you advising the students that you work with, the students that you serve in their last weeks to prepare?
Great question. I had one of these calls today just about mental frame, right? And what I told this person who's in our program is that let's make this Zoom the last time for the next week and a half that you let the doubts come into your mind. Like it's nothing but positive affirmations. And I told her, when in doubt, document. So write your name, comma, CFP, and really, really buy into that, because as was shared before, the psychological part of this is as important as the book knowledge at this point, just because of when it's real, when you're in the actual center and it's live, it feels surreal just because you've had so much time in other Q banks and so many hours invested and so many sacrifices from you and those around you. So what I also share is there are different philosophies on this, but I continue to drop back on, you have been flying across country on a 757, you're the pilot for 3 months now, and you're going at 550 miles an hour, that in order for you to safely land this, that you need to start just dropping down in altitude and you need to start pulling back on the speed. I'm a big proponent of tapering, just like a marathon runner would at the end of their training, so that you're well rested, you're taking good care of yourself, and just trust in the work that you've done up until your exam date, that you've put the time in. And those are my two go-tos. But everyone is nervous around this time, and I think it's important to have a place to share that with, whether it's trusted friend. We've been big proponents of group study and encourage people in groups to just support one another, because it could be a really isolating experience. I'm sure, as a lot of people on the panel and in the crowd are experiencing, that you're alone a lot. So finding those connections is always helpful as well.
This last week is actually about encouraging not just yourself, but encourage others who are taking the exam. Showing gratitude to others will actually make you feel less anxious. Like, I deal with my own anxiety, and by just discussing that anxiety freely with other people, actually helps, you share the burden of that anxiety. So encouraging each other, encouraging yourself. I love that. Instead of asking yourself what could go wrong, ask yourself, what if it goes perfectly, right? Going in with that type of mindset, cognitive behavioral therapy approach is really helpful for me, not just for exam taking, but just for life. How did you keep composure and pace yourself through that, through those exam? I think it's, still multiple, like 1/2, 2/2 type of exam.
I heard so many other people saying, oh yeah, I had all this time at the end of the quarter, at the end of the half. I'm like, what? I used every single second I could. So
I'm so glad you're here.
So there's some of us that are not fast readers, or we read for comprehension, or we're more thorough. So for me, I took deep breaths in between the questions, and that supposedly relaxes your diaphragm, and it did help. And I was doing that about a week before as well to make sure. So my biggest stressor was definitely the case studies. So I had practiced those a lot. It was not going to work for me to read through it in the very beginning. So I basically had 3 steps: skim it, go to the questions, and then laser focus on getting answers to those questions using the highlight feature, the strikeout feature, and things like that. So that all came together. And once I started doing it that way, it was almost a little bit easier, because I knew that in a lot of cases, there was pieces of information that was in multiple locations. So the footnotes had a lot of information that was helpful. I mean, literally, sometimes there would be answers right there in the footnotes if I would just look for them. And then doing a control find, that was really helpful in particular with the case, or I'm not sure if control find, but there's a magnifying glass where you go in there, and when you do the Prometric demo, you can use all those features. The cases were definitely my biggest stressor the day of and the days leading into the exam. Seems like there's a lot of questions that say everything except, or it's not, and that one little word could make a difference. And when I was going through my mock exams, I noticed me slipping up on little things like that, and it wasn't worth losing that point because I didn't really read it well enough. So I used the heck out of the highlighting feature.
So I think listening to all of you, I realized I'm also the only person, I guess, that took it at home. So I took the exam from my office, and that was a great experience. I think I much less enjoyed taking the Series 65 at the Prometric Center, but just know that that's an option for you.
Did you take deep breaths between questions? I know it's really important that just to know that the question you're taking probably has nothing to do with the question before it. So just mentally reset, take that breath. So how did you mentally go through each question so without getting overwhelmed with the experience?
Exams normally never bother me. I've never had the test taker anxiety or anything. Again, if I had not known that I would find out immediately when I hit submit, whether or not I had a hope of passing, I think I would have done a lot better. But my strategy is that I tend to know what I know really well, and I know what I don't know. And so as I'm going through the questions, if there's a question I don't know, I honestly am okay making my best guess in 10 seconds and moving on to something that I know. So my strategy is really to get everything right that I should get right, and then just to make a decent guess by eliminating at least 2 of the options and then on the other questions. So I really am not that person to spend much time on a question. So I did have a lot of time left over in each section, but I know I also left some questions on the table probably, but that's my approach. But I think that that's a very individual thing. I will say, Jackie is talking about those dang scenario questions. Those are harder. And so just being able to read through them, keep them straight, and then make sure that you know what they're actually looking for, because they obviously give you way too much information. So I think I would read the scenario first quickly, kind of like she said, and then I'd really read the questions and I would read the answers. And then I would kind of try to go back and figure that out.
Test pace was hard for me, especially in the practice exam too. So like Jackie, I used all 3 hours down to the last 2 minutes, just leave myself a little buffer in case when I hit submit something bad happened. So I didn't think about it a ton during the exam, but I did check for major checkpoints. I knew, I needed to be at question 20 by about the 45-minute mark. It wasn't exact, just kind of used it for benchmarks. I didn't want to get too far behind. And then, I finished the first 3 hours. They give you, I think, 30 or 40 minutes to a break before the second half. I only took 20 minutes because I wanted to, kind of keep my juices flowing. But also, in the prep, you learn a lot of acronyms. One that I'll always remember forever, and Adam and the BIF crew taught it to us, is RTFQ, and that is read the full question and the full answer. So, I use that mantra all the way through the test. It helped quite a bit. If I read a question and I didn't comprehend it right away, I kind of marked it for review and moved on because I didn't want to waste too much time with it. Case studies were hard, lots of information to get through. I kind of took the approach where I kind of skimmed it. I wanted to get the feel for it, but then I went and looked at the questions, so if there were 4 or 5 questions to it, I said, okay, here's the main things they're looking for. Then I went back to the case study and kind of read it a little bit deeper in those areas, because there was a lot of extraneous, unnecessary information in those. To me, it was just important to, like everybody said, take a breath. If you're getting frustrated, you'll eventually going to come on a question that and that'll put you back on track.
You have a total of 170 questions. It's split into 285 question halves. The way CFP board does it now, maybe someone, any of our panelists can tell me specifically when the first break came, but now they organize it into quarters. And I think Is it at question 43, 42, somewhere around there? 43. Okay, thanks, Damien. Yeah, it's kind of like a basketball game, like an NBA game, right? So you have quarters and you have a longer halftime. And what happens though is when you get to your first end of quarter, so at question 43, you have a prompt that asks you, do you want to take a break? At that point, clock is still running. But if you say no and you want to proceed, it locks up that first quarter. So it's important to just keep that in mind as you're going through your exam, because there have been very few stories since they put this into play where I've heard of someone locking something up before they got all their questions done. And as you'd imagine, if they didn't do a whole lot, some people have a strategy to wait on the case study until they get through all of the standalone questions. If you have a case study up on the top, and that's a possibility that could really hurt your performance. You have a 40-minute break in between your half one, half two. I often tell people it's more of a 20-minute break because you want to make sure you log out, you get up from your space, you go for a walk. You never know what check-in's going to look like when you're going back into the Prometric space. So give yourself enough time, because at that 40-minute mark, your clock starts running for half two. You go through the same process on half two. You have 43 questions. You want to take a break? If no, locks up into your final quarter. Then the real nerves start kicking in, because you finally at the end and you submit, and they say, do you really want to submit? And you say yes, and a little rainbow pinwheel comes up on your screen and you start sweating and your heart starts beating out of your chest. And then they say, great, can you take the survey? And you get launched into a survey from CFP board, and you fill out their survey, and then it goes through another endless rainbow swirl, and then you get preliminary results. So for people that are sitting in March, you're going to get preliminary results. It'll be a preliminary pass or a preliminary fail. If you get the preliminary pass, it's a pass. We've never heard of anyone ever getting the preliminary pass and then have it taken away. For preliminary fail, there have been people that have got the golden ticket, right? That have failed. They have a 4-week break where they review scores to make sure that they're aligning with what they predicted. And there are times where they'll pull a question off of an exam and people actually have their score move into pass zone. It's very rare, but it does happen. If you fail, you get a report from Prometric that speaks very high level about how you performed on each of the different domains. And it's really just it's a line with a little caret that says high to the right and low to the left. Each question's a point. It is not weighted while you're taking it. There's a process that you don't need to learn about now because you have too many things on your mind called modified Angoff scoring, where they weight different items before they go live to the exam, and they do that to figure out where the cut score is. So I saw some questions about the cut score. It's unknown. CFP board doesn't share it with us. If I were to use, my best guesstimate, it's around that FINRA licensing exam range, probably, but we don't know. And what we do know are the results, and you can go to cfp.net. I don't know if I'd advise that right now, because I would be nervous looking at percentage pass rates at this point in time. But if you're brave and you really want to know, you can go there and see the percentages of people that have passed from cycle to cycle since they started the exam.
Do you suggest doing a brain dump? So when you first get started, like if you have all those acronyms in your head and you think they're going to fall out, did any of you write down things immediately on that paper as soon as you sat down for the exam?
I did not. It's just too much information that you need to know. So why,
Right.
why try to collect this information of things that you may never get asked? I mean, there's literally thousands of questions that they could ask, and you're only getting 170.
Mm-hmm.
I was just gonna say, I think like Jackie said, as you get to taking the test, those things will pop into your head. And if you're trying to force yourself to memorize it and regurgitate it, I personally feel like that just messed me up. Someone asked on the side about how it was taking it online. And I will say, if you are a visual person and you like to draw, I would probably go to the testing center and use the paper, because I had to do this little digital notepad. It was not very good. And so I barely used it. And so I really only used it for the multiple step type problems or something. But if that is the type of person you are, maybe doing it at the Prometric would be best.
I agree. I thought it was a waste of time to kind of do a brain dump, but there was one thing that drove me nuts, and that was calls and puts. So I did, do a quick matrix of up and down, and just because I was so worried about messing it up when the time came. So I did do that one.
There's a more detailed learning objectives list. It's not fully current, but it's all relevant. Take a look at the things that are in there. See how it breaks down beyond just grantor trusts. What are some of the topics and subtopics that they're asking question writers to write about? And a good exercise right now is, if you see a topic, we tell people in our program, top of mind, give us at this point 5 facts on that. Just what is it? How does it work? Taxation, if that's an issue. Is it connected to anything? What are some planning applications, right? Or just 5 general facts. You want to work on that quick recall so that when you do RTFQ, you can then apply, right? Because it's an application scenario-based exam.
Well, Cody, I was just going to say that is a detailed learning objectives, and I spent time on that because, the review programs don't exactly know what's going to be in there. So it's possible that something could be left out. So I made sure I went and looked through that detailed learning objective, and it got very specific. So I was really looking for something that I had no clue and had never heard before. So there was 1 or 2 things that I did pick up on. I'm like, oh, we didn't go over it. And there's no way that the review class can cover every little minutia, but it was helpful. And I didn't do this close to the end. It was more early on, just to take a look, and then maybe closer to the exam, I would do another quick over to say, okay, what is completely foreign to me that I need to at least know what it is and that it could be tested. So thanks for mentioning that, Adam, that I used that.
The day before the exam, I read through the code of ethics one more time just to keep that fresh, because it wasn't easy for me. Like this, for some reason, some of that stuff was harder for me to memorize because it wasn't like applicable to like real life. I know that code of ethics certainly should apply to real life, but reading through the code of ethics was something like that was a little bit, it wasn't as heavy technically, but it still felt like I was learning something in those last few days of just like kind of just tightening those screws of my knowledge. Go ahead, Jackie.
Well, I was about to say, in addition to reading through the code of ethics, because I am an auditory and a visual learner. So I think the CFP board has those on their YouTube channel. There's podcasts. I think Adam, I listen to Biff Bites all the time. That was like my main go-to auditory way to learn as I was practicing for the exam, and I wanted a good podcast. So audio-visual learners, I used to get scared when people say, oh, go read this, go read that. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to read that and retain it. So if there's a video, if there's a podcast or whatever, audio-visual learners, there's usually a version available for you too.
The BIF YouTube channel, we have a lot of what we call mini bites. They're 5 minutes long. They cover a lot of testable topics. There's one on margin calls. There's another on Roth distributions. And a bunch of other stuff that's there. I will often plug, I call him my main man, Christopher Smalls of CMS Law Firm. He has a podcast called Estate Planning Strategies. And I tell people in my estate planning classes to listen to him. I've told people in our current cohort as well. What I love about it is that his episodes are 2 minutes to 7 minutes long. So if you need a quick, focused, great discussion. I mean, I think he really spells things out nicely on the estate planning side. And because a lot of us are unfamiliar with it, it's just great to hear someone new teaching you in a very simple way, because this is supposed to be client facing. This is client acquisition material, speaking at the level of a client about revocable trusts, irrevocable trusts, charitable trusts, annual exemption amount. So those are 2 great resources. I've also mentioned Andy Panko's podcast as well. I think that's a great podcast, period, but also for CFP as well.
Feel free to check out other resources to supplement your program. You don't have to just do that. And it helped me tremendously. So thank you guys.
Last word from me, I guess, is to all the test takers, don't second guess yourself. Your first instinct is going to usually be your best one if you logically thought through everything. So you're ready. And Cody, thanks for having me, and good luck with your launch tomorrow.
Adam, any last words to the test takers?
This community needs you. And that's not to add pressure, but just, Cody, you and I have talked about this, how it feels really big when you're in this place, but there's so much good work that happens afterward. And if you've followed your routine and you've put the work in, it can actually, you can get in there and build confidence in your exam because of what you know and how you've been training. So we're rooting for you. And I know that this panel especially is very, very generous with their time and knowledge and sharing their experiences. And I'd say a lot in the financial planning community are just the same. So be sure to connect with people here that interest you, through LinkedIn and through these other social sites. There's a lot of great knowledge, and I learn every day from being a part of a broader planning community. So there's a lot of learning that happens afterward. But good luck, and we're all rooting for you.
Right now, this exam is is the biggest thing in your life. Just to let you know, 6 months will pass, and you'll be like, you'll actually go a whole day without thinking about the CFP exam or even the designation. So just because this is the biggest thing in your life, just know that this is not going to be how you feel forever. And that feeling will end, and you're going to be able to share that knowledge generously with others moving forward. We're so excited for you. Thanks so much for everybody being here. I'll send out the recording if anybody missed anything, but I love you all, and I'll see you tomorrow.